A warm welcome to one and all on this, the latest episode of the God for Everyday podcasts. This is looking forward to the fifth Sunday in Ordinary Time as we continue to be on the mountain with Jesus, who's disclosing his heart to us, the vision of the kingdom as this Sermon on the Mount, as it's traditionally referred to. We heard last week of the Beatitudes, and today we see a bit of a shift as I myself, Father Kyle Dave, am joined again by Father William Maestri. We welcome one and all as we enter into this conversation as Jesus moves us. Father Maestri, I think from the interiority of what the Beatitudes call forth into what this can be and what he's looking for us to do.
Well, it's nice to be with you again, and certainly to our audience. Thank you for your being with us, and hope that these podcasts are truly blessings to you as we all come off the mountain and have to go down to where the, shall we say, the Michelin meets the road in the everyday living.
Yes.
And our coming off of the mountain is interesting because our gospel reading for this fifth Sunday makes a very interesting analogy or metaphor, if you will. Jesus compares our lives and discipleship with two very ordinary things, light and salt. We don't think about these things very often. We walk into a room, we hit the switch, and hopefully it's on. If not, we go into a panic. But anyway, usually that. And salt, we just kind of shake it around, and we don't really think about it that much. And yet it is in those ordinary things that Jesus will say, you are to be light and salt. And that has very deep biblical roots, as you know, because I think our readings very much highlight this idea of especially light.
Yes.
Light.
Indeed. In fact, the first reading is taken from the book of the prophet Isaiah. And Isaiah says, thus says the Lord, share your bread. This is Isaiah 58, verse 7 through 10. Share your bread with the hungry, shout to the oppressed and the homeless, clothe the naked when you see them, and do not turn your back on your own. Then your light shall break forth like the dawn, and your wound shall quickly be healed. Your vindication shall go before you, and the glory of the Lord shall be your rear guard. That's like about midway through the reading, but right there you see it, as you've already alluded to. We see the gospel, which is always set up as a fulfillment of what has preceded, the law and the prophets. And of course, you can't ask for a better prophet to set the stage for Jesus than the one that the church fathers referred to as the fifth gospel, the writing of Isaiah. So beautifully composed and highlighting Jesus as that suffering servant of the Lord, the leader, the servant king, so to speak.
Yes. And so often when we hear many of these things from the Bible, as well as from our developed theology, or spirituality, as we call it, but our spirituality can never be divorced from our materiality. We hear the beautiful Sermon on the Mount, the greatest sermon ever preached. And it's, blessed are the poor in spirit, and the meek and the humble. Blessed are they who are peacemakers, the pure of heart, all of these kind of things. They're first order principles. They're up there, and they really don't have any texture to them or flesh and blood. In that reading you just referenced from Isaiah, it says very specifically, feed, share, and very material things, clothing, food, and so on like that. And in the most dramatic way there at the end, that the presence of God shines forth through you. Your light is really a reflected light. It reminds me of St. Ambrose. St. Ambrose had a wonderful analogy with the church and Christ. He said, that Christ is the light. The church is like the moon. It has no light of its own, but only reflects the light who is Christ.
Yeah, that's it.
The church gets into trouble when it tries to reflect itself. The Christian gets into trouble when, we have a success at something, or the people really respond, and we say, oh, man, I'm really good. I could be the next Fulton Sheen. Let me assure you, you're not. And I think St. Paul tried to preach himself. That was a disaster.
It's interesting that you mention that because the second reading, St. Paul's first epistle to the Corinthians, chapter 2, verse 1 through 5, and he says, "When I came to you, brothers and sisters, proclaiming the mystery of God, I did not come with sublimity of words or of wisdom, for I resolved to know nothing while I was with you except Jesus Christ and him crucified. I came to you in weakness and fear and much trembling, and my message and my proclamation were not with persuasive words of wisdom, but with a demonstration of spirit and power, so that your faith might rest not on human wisdom, but on the power of God." And that's so significant because we know that prior to coming to Corinth, he was in Greece, in Athens rather, in the Areopagus, and he had gone in there having been trained very extensively under the tutelage of Gamaliel, the master rabbi of the times, and he was at his feet, and he was a master. Paul was an excellent philosopher. He had the philosophy, and so he went in there thinking, well, I'm going to ingratiate myself with these people. They're men of philosophy, of reason, and this is what he went in there with. And of course, when he got to speaking about Jesus Christ crucified and risen from the dead, we think we'll listen to you on this matter at another time. Because,
Yes.
because as you know, the Greeks were bought, but the body was like as a cage. They look at the body as a cage for the soul. It was a hindrance. It wasn't. They didn't see it as an extension. They didn't see them as coexisting in the same metaphysical reality, so say.
Well, we are called to communicate the gospel, not capitulate the gospel or compromise the gospel. It's very important that we communicate it. It has to be in a language, in the historical context and culture and all of that. But there's a certain point in which there are things that are non-negotiable. And we have to be careful. Paul tried to preach and tickle their ears, as he will tell Timothy later on. That's what he tried. And it was a disaster. It was a disaster. And that was a community. Corinth, we believe, is a community that Paul founded and developed. And you can only imagine him coming back from this disaster. And he's looking at the city. And notice how in the beginning of Corinthians, he really shifts gears. Where is the philosopher? Where is the wise man, the scribe? Were you saved by worldly wisdom? Were you saved by the philosopher? No, you were saved by the absurdity of the cross. Absurd to Greeks, scandal to Jews.
The stumbling block.
That's right. But it is the power of God and the wisdom of God. And in our everyday life, back to that, it is in the everyday marrow of everyday existence, the buzz, boom, and bang of everyday life. That's where the Christian life, where growing in discipleship and close to Christ, really takes on reality of flesh and blood. Do I share with those who have less? Do I provide shelter? Do I do the ordinary everyday things of life that somehow radiate Christ in helping others? How many people come to us, especially the young today?
That's right.
Especially the young today. And they're looking for guidance. They're looking for directions. They don't necessarily need a moral lecture. They need to see some words of empathy and also connection. If we can tap back into our own period of development and share that, we're doing that.
Yes, we are. And that actually, you making reference to that brings me back to an earlier time in my priesthood. I was my first pastorate at Sacred Heart of Jesus in Lacombe.
Let me interrupt you, please.
Yes.
Because I want you to tell this, but I want to tell our faithful viewers that this is another a little peeling back of the layer into the mystery of the hidden years of Father Kyle Dave. No, this is a great real life experience that Father Kyle had, which is very, very significant, with a group of special children. He's going to tell you about it, and it's really worth listening because I think all of us can relate to this in our own fashion. And so, please.
Yeah, so I had two prominent deacons with me. One was Deacon Steve Ferran, and his wife, Darlene Ferran, was a teacher for the special ed group at Mandeville Elementary. And she said, Father, it would be nice if you could come and share something with the children and so forth. And And I said, okay. And so she set up the date. And when I went, taking somewhat the lead of St. Paul, but thinking back on my years of formation in the seminary, when you go to preach, to get that attention-getting device, what are you going to do to capture the imagination of the audience? And so I decided I would share with them a the rap from an artist that I was very enamored with when rap music, that genre of hip hop music, was in its golden years, as I would say, in the 80s into the 90s, but especially the 80s. There was one artist named Slick Rick. That was his stage name, Slick Rick. He was from the UK, from the United Kingdom in England, London proper. He was born, and he had a beautiful way. The album was entitled The Great Adventures of Slick Rick. And this particular song was called Children's Story. It had a very good message. And for me, I was about 12 or 13 when I discovered it, and just absolutely listened to it endlessly, and to the point where from all those years ago, I have it memorized. And so I said, I'm going to open up with this with the children, but not letting them hear it with all the music and the bells and whistles, so that they could really hear the story, the message, and invite them to speak to that. And so this is what happened. I went into the room and I said, I'd like to share with you all the story. Would you like to hear it? And they said, yes, yeah. And I said, Uncle Ricky, would you read us a bedtime story? Please. All right, you kids get to bed. I'll go get the storybook. Oh, yeah, wow, yeah. Y'all tucked in? Yeah. Here we go. Once upon a time not long ago, when people wore pajamas and lived life slow, when laws were stern and justice stood, and people were behaving like they ought to good, there lived a little boy who was misled by another little boy, and this is what he said. Me and you, chap, we're gonna make some cash, robbing old folks and making a dash. They did the job. Money came with ease, but one couldn't stop. It's like he had a disease. He robbed another, and a sister and a brother. Tried to rob a man who was a DT undercover. The cop grabbed his arm. He started acting erratic. He said, keep still, boy. No need for static. Punched him in his belly, and he gave him a slap. But little did he know, the little boy was strapped. The kid was out of the gun. He says, why'd you hit me? The barrel's head straight for the cop's kidney. The cop got scared. The kid, he starts to figure, I'll do years if I pull this trigger. So he cold dashed and ran around the block. Cop radios into another lady cop. He ran by a tree. There he saw the sister. Shot for the head. He shot back, but he missed her. Looked round good, and from expectations, he decided he'd head for the subway station. But what? She was coming in. He made a left. He was running top speed till he was out of breath. He knocked an old man down and swore he killed him, sorry. Then he made his move to an abandoned building, ran up the stairs up to the top floor, opened up the door. Hey, guess we saw? Dave, the dope fiend, shoot and don't hoot, don't know the meaning of water nor soap. He said, I need bullets. Hurry up, run. The dope fiend brought back a spanking shotgun. He ran outside, but there were cops all over, so he dipped into a car, a stolen Nova, raced up the block doing 83, crashed into a tree near University, escaped alive though the car was battered, rat-a-tat-tat, and all the cops scattered. Ran out of bullets, but still had static. Grabbed a pregnant lady and put out the automatic. Pointed at her head, he said the gun was full of lead. He told the cops, back off, or honey is dead. Deep in his heart, he knew he was wrong. So he let the lady go, and he starts to run on. Sirens sounded as he seemed astounded, and before long the little boy was surrounded. He dropped his gun, and so went the glory. And this is the way I have to end this story. He was only 17 in a madman's dream. The cop shot the kid. I still hear him scream. This ain't funny, so don't you dare laugh. It's just another case about the wrong path. Straight and arrow or your soul gets cast. Good night. Gee, that Uncle Ricky, he really is strange. What does he mean, straight and arrow or your soul gets cast? I don't know. It's like you said, he's really strange. He's really strange. And so it went forth.
Yes. And the response, what was the response of the children to this? Even though our lady detective, depending upon you, would probably never have gotten there. But anyway, just kidding, folks. No nasty letters. What happened?
So I did. I asked the children what struck them. One child asked, Father, was the little boy, was he white or was he black? Huh? I said, well, it doesn't say. That's the beauty of the story.
Yes.
It's open-ended. You can read into it what you'd like, whoever you want it to be. You can even put yourself in it if you wanted to.
That's right.
And then another one says, was he Russian? And I said,
Yes.
I said, again, we don't know. He could have been. You could make him that. I mean, Russian, African, Filipino, Latin, one of the Latin countries, whatever you want, Vietnamese, whatever. And then one of the children said, well, Father, I was really, when you said he was running up the stairs up to the top floor and opened up the door, I was on the edge of my seat. I wanted to know what was going to be on the other side of the door. So I asked him, were you surprised? And he said, yeah, it was. So each one of them gave a perspective that was interesting. But as we were having our engagement, one of the students was out because this special ed group was like a blended learning group. It was from 4th grade to 6th graders. And so when the 6th grader returned to the class, they said, oh, Father, Timmy wasn't here. Could you do it again for him so that he can hear and then offer his thoughts? I said, y'all really want to hear the story again? And they said, yeah. So I went ahead and recounted the story. And then I asked Timmy, so would you like to share what strikes you? And he said, well, Father, what caught my attention was that in as much as the young man's life ended so tragically, he was essentially good. I said, really? I said, very good. Tell me, how do you get that? What gave you that from the story? And he says, well, first of all, you says, once upon a time not long ago, when people wore pajamas and lived life slow, when laws were stern and justice stood, and people were behaving like they ought to good. So he was in a cultural time in which the people, they knew what it was to live a good way. In a good way, they knew right from wrong and so on. I said, okay, very good. I said, so what else? And once he got into the scuffle, once the police officer hit him, and he actually had the gun aimed at the kidney of the officer, the DT, the detective, he says, he even reasons. He says, if I pull this trigger, I'll do time. I'll if I pull this trigger, I'll be in trouble. He knew that if he was to shoot the police officer, so he let him go, and he runs on. And as he was running, you said he ran into an old man and swore he killed him. He said, sorry. He took the moment to say, I'm sorry. He was mindful of injuring. And then finally, at the end, as after he made noise with the shotgun, he had the revolver and he put the automatic rather at the point at the woman's head who was pregnant. And he said, and it says that deep in his heart, he knew he was wrong. So he let the lady go and he starts to run on. And I said, yes, this is very well. I affirmed. I said, this is excellent. Because I've shared this with groups of, in high school level, even in college level, gifted, Catholic schools, public schools, everything, every different group. And no group shared the type of insight that this young 6th grader, who was in the quote unquote special ed track, gave that insight, and no one ever since.
Well, I think that child was an example of original innocence.
Mm.
And what I mean by that is not weighed down by all the baggage, either of intellectualism or even of harsh experiences. Because, for example, the prophet Jeremiah says that there will be a new covenant or a new law, and it will be written on the heart. Each of us is gifted with the natural law of right and wrong, good and evil. And at some level of our life, we know that. We know those. So the guy says, I'm sorry, knocking her down or this or that. There is an empathy and a connection there that indicates that this is not something right, that there is something wrong there.
Indeed.
And I think that that's important, that we are really made for good. We're not born evil. We don't have this desire to be evil. It's a wound, and we are, if you want, deprived, but we're not depraved. We're not these depraved beings. And it's that ability to connect, I think, with the goodness in people. But in all honesty, I'm not a fan of rap music. Okay, I'm not. And having said that, I'm more in the music of the big bands, the 40s, the 50s, and Perry Como, Frank Sinatra, Dean Martin, all that sort of stuff, genre. Okay.
Benny Goodman and that
Yeah,
one.
Betty Goodman. But that's fine. And but I want to hasten to add that it's very important, though, to communicate again through the genre, whether it be literature, art, music, the fine arts, uh, the other arts, um, to do that. I mean, St. Paul did that. St. Paul learned that lesson. And I think as evangelizers, if that connects with the right lyrics, as you said, look, everything human can be corrupted. We know that. I don't care what it is. But this particular selection that you selected, it obviously touched a chord. For good,
Yes.
and it spoke to them. So, am I for that? Absolutely, absolutely. Hey, if that does it, that's great. They have things now out that helps children in elementary school connect with Shakespeare, for example. They redo it in such a way that it connects. That's wonderful creativity. That's not destroying. That's enhancing.
Exactly. And the conversation opened up further because then the children, after that, obviously that was a major icebreaker for them. For me, we were they kind of like, they were, wow, this is something. In the gospel, Jesus uh, hones the message. He gives us two very provocative images, as we already alluded to. He says, a city set on a mountain cannot be hidden, nor do they light a lamp and then put it under a bushel basket. It is set on a lampstand where it gives light to all in the house. In the conversation with these young children, one of the children asked me, said, Father, if you could have any superpower whatsoever, what would you choose? What would you get? What would you ask for? And I said, I would want to be able to be in two places at one time. That's called being able to bilocate two places in one time, because then I could do the work of the gospel, which is so much to be done. I can do twice as much by being in two places at one time. Another child said, Father, if you could be any piece of furniture you chose to be in a house, what would you choose to be? Well, initially my thought was, interiorly, I thought maybe like a sofa or a recliner or a bed, to give a person, you work hard to be able to relax, to rest, to renew yourself. But then, for whatever reason, of course, the Holy Spirit's at work in these situations. I said I would choose to be a lampstand. And they're kind of looking at me like that. A lampstand. You know what a lampstand is, huh? They said, yes. I said, because I would like to be able to be a lampstand, because then somebody could put a light bulb in it and it would illuminate. It gives light to those in the house. And you know how valuable, how much we enjoy light in relationship to darkness. And they were like, wow, and the eyes opened up, and it was just a moment there that I would not have, I was surprised. I would have asked those kind of questions, but this is what happened. And whenever I read this part of the Sermon on the Mount, it always brings me back to that time, and it brought me into that experience.
Before time gets away from us, I want to say an appreciative word for salt.
Okay.
I realize salt has become something that we have to be very careful of because we have high blood pressure and all these other sorts of things. Oh, please. Get a hold of yourself. But salt is a very, very important symbol in the Bible, but it was also a very important reality of people's everyday life because they didn't have refrigeration. They didn't have all of that kind of stuff. Salt was a preservative. It was a preservative. It was also a flavoring. It was something to enhance. And salt was also a symbol of the virtue of prudence, good judgment. If you have especially an Italian grandmother who likes to cook, and what Italian grandma doesn't, they always think theirs is the best, or at least you better say they are. Otherwise, you pay a price for that, believe me. They didn't cook by written recipes. They knew by touch and experience, etc. So when you wanted a seasoning, such as salt, or maybe pepper, or some other condiment that was there, they did it with their hand. A pinch of this, some of that, or a little more of this. But they used that judgment. The classic example, of course, from the Hebrew scriptures is Lot's wife. They, God was going to nuke Sodom and Gomorrah, and I'll give them, I guess we would say today, the bomb buster, the bunker buster, and get out of town because they were good, worth saving. But there's one thing you can't do: don't look back. And Lot's wife looks back, and she's turned into a pillar of salt.
Yes.
It was very imprudent to test God. He already spared you, but now he's telling you, just don't look back, and she does, and it becomes a pillar of salt. And I think salt is a flavoring. It's also wise in terms of how much you measure out. And it's also a preservative. And Christ says you are to be salt. And if it loses its flavor, what will make it salt again? It can't. We are not to be doom and gloom.
Mm-hmm.
We're not to be afraid that somewhere somebody's having a good time. We are proclaiming good news, not good information, not interesting, but that. And we are to flavor, enrich, elevate where we are in our everyday life. But I had to get that in for Morton. So.
Yeah, and I think that's important. How do we sense, what would we imagine Jesus' countenance, the countenance of his face, the expression of his face, as he's teaching us this great revelation of his heart, of the mission, of the gospel, the kingdom that he's inaugurating and bringing us to, inviting us to be participants in. I have to believe he had a beautiful smile on his face.
Yes.
You know, this is a pleasant look,
Right.
a face of that this wants, you want to be, you know, one of those, an inviting expression.
That's right.
And so forth. And this is what I think we need to hold on to as we look towards how we can take this theology from above that Jesus couches in the realities of our day-to-day living, salt and light, and of clothing the naked, sheltering the homeless, feeding the hungry, giving drink to the thirsty, comforting the sick, visiting the prisoner, what have you. All of these, as you mentioned at the outset, as we've been fleshing this out, all of these are ways in which that disposition of being of the attitude of Christ. So, as we mentioned from St. Paul's letter to the Philippians, he didn't see his essence of being divine and equal to God as something to be held on to grasp, but he emptied himself, taking the form of the servant, of the slave.
That's right.
And this is what he's inviting us to.
Yeah, and I think that's exactly what the Christian is called to be in their everyday life. And he's also called in his everyday life to be on time. And while we want salt and light and all of that, we also have to pay attention to the winged chariot of time.
Yes.
And we're winding down. And Father, I think it's been very enlightening, if you'll pardon the pun, and flavorful, I hope. And so we're at the end. And as always, if you would take us out, please.
Yes, absolutely. And beloved, as we move towards this fifth Sunday in Ordinary Time, that story that I shared with the young people, I eventually let them hear it with all the music and all the bells and whistles. You'll have an opportunity to experience that song. There will be a special link that will be attached to this episode. But that aside, let us continue to remain with the Lord, open and receptive to the reality of the God for every day who continues to woo us. He wants to draw out from us and draw us with him to him so that we can realize the joy that comes from letting everything go to his glory and his honor. And so until the next time, may the good God of heaven and earth continue to bless you and yours, the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit.
Amen.